Herzlich willkommen hier im Saal 2. Hallo, beim Comicfestival München. Wir werden jetzt über Comics aus Polen sprechen. Es ist mir eine große Ehre, dass ich zwei Gäste aus Polen hier auf dem Podium begrüßen darf. Zur linken Zosia, Dzierżawska.
Dobry dzień.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Und Marcin Podolec. Und der direkte Anlass für unser Hiersein ist, dass die neue Ausgabe des Strapazins. I'll do the introduction in German, I will switch.
Yeah.
In a second. We will do it in English, not in Polish. But I'm just saying a few words before we start. It's a repetition of what I said before. It's Strapazin aus München, Comic-Magazin, kennen die meisten vielleicht von euch, gibt es seit 30 Jahren, erscheint alle 3 Monate jeweils mit Themenausgaben. Können ganz abstrakte Themen sein oder wie in diesem Fall Comics aus Polen. Ich bin der Redakteur, das ist der Maiwald dieser Ausgabe, und ich bin vor einigen Jahren nach Polen gereist zu einem Comicfestival, ohne wirklich zu wissen, was mich da erwartet. Ich habe damals bei Redprodukt gearbeitet und habe Marvel begleitet, dessen Bücher in Polen erscheinen. Der war als Künstler eingeladen, da dachte ich, schön, verkaufe ich da auch mal ein paar Bücher, lese mir mal an. Und ich hatte wirklich keine Idee, was da auf mich warten würde. You're speaking English only, right?
Yes.
So I will switch. I didn't know really what to expect when I came to Poland for the first time, to the festival in Łódź. And I was really surprised, practically blown away by the variety of material that they offered, the quality of, that was shown on the tables at the publishers, and really the liveliness of a scene that I really didn't know anything about. I mean, we know, since we are growing up with comics here in Germany and we are interested in Germany, probably you too, you're from Egypt, right? You have a fairly good understanding of what's going on in America, what's going on right next door to Germany in France. That's some things that people know about because those are the comics mentioned. But when I was there, I really was puzzled, like, hey, Poland is our next door neighbor too, and we have no clue that there is such a cool scene. And this is something that I wanted to present in the new issue of Strapazin. It is a selection of short stories, 9 or 10. Two short stories were not made exclusively for this, so most of them hadn't been published anywhere else before. It's a mostly independent comics because it's the focus of Strapazin. It's only one selection of many that I could have made. Because there is really such an abundance of talent in Poland, in working in different media. I mean, different genres. There's also fantasy and kind of superhero-ish stuff. Well, for Strapazin I chose. Well, I made a selection that you can find in it. I can only recommend having a look at the magazine or going to the Strapazin studio. Strapazin is published in Zurich and Munich. They have a studio here which offers also an exhibition space. So many pages from the new issue can be seen in their original form. Of our 2 guests, there's even a little more on display. And it's in the festival program, it's pretty nearby, it's like a 10-15 minute walk from here. And yeah, I'm really happy that you two can be here because, not only because I think you're a great artist, but also because you are representing different aspects of the Polish, let's say, independent comic scene. We will talk a bit about it, but since this discussion and this issue is also about comics from Poland, it has this general tone. I mean, I would also like to ask you a few general questions. Like, for example, you grew up in the 80s and 90s. What were were comics around when you grew up? What comics were you reading? Were you reading comics?
Yeah, I was, and it was only Donald Duck, Tom and Jerry, and stuff like that. Years before I was born in 1991, and there were, classic Polish authors like Tadeusz Baranowski, Grzegorz Rosiński, who were so famous. Yes. Also Jan Krista and Tytus Romek Giatomek from Parcza Chmiel. I don't know if you know. There's an old strong generation of Polish artists, and then there was a big break, and only Donald Duck and American stuff was present on our market. And then was something changed because of guys called a group of Product. Product was a Polish independent magazine. Published in 90s or in the beginning of this century, and yes, it was a revolution on the Polish comic market, and the youngest generation is based on guys from Product magazine. Without Product, there will be nothing. Yes, nothing now in Poland.
So were you aware of this group?
I was, but I was already, because I'm roughly 10 years older than Marcin. So I grew up in the 80s, and I grew up with those old school Polish comics that were not, there was not a lot of them, but they were quite present. Like Rosiński with Torgal and that kind of stuff.
I need to add the most famous comics were about, police or detective, like Kapitan Klaus.
Yeah, they were all like genre comics. There were no independent comics, or maybe there was like an underground punk scene, but if you were a 7-year-old in Warsaw, you would not have a way to find it at all. So you would only find the mainstream, which were like fantasy comics. And
so Thorgal, for example, is probably the one comic of a Polish artist that is best known also in Germany. It's kind of a fantasy series, but I also saw, for example, Kapitan Klaus, which I found quite charming, and it seemed very classic to me, like it's been around forever.
Yeah, so there were like war detective comics from drawn in the style of the 50s for like 4 decades.
Yeah, comic adaptations of lectures, stuff like that.
There was also one particular genre which I had when I was young. It was like comic, also in a very realistic, like fantasy style, adaptations of like important historical moments in Polish history.
Yeah.
So I had like the battle of, Maiwald was like adapted to with those like superhero Slavic things. And
did those comics give you the idea to become a comics artist yourself? How did you come up with the idea of drawing comics?
Sorry, one thing was, because in 80s in Poland there was big troubles with paper, print comics, so there were queues for printing run. And for example, if you were Grzegorz Rosiński, you were always first on the list. And if you were less known, you were...
and also another like particular thing about the time is that there were a few references from like international comics, but they existed. They were just a bit different because like the government under communism, they didn't really care about foreign rights. So they just took, like someone brought like American books into Poland and they published them without any consultation or paying any sort of fees. And I had my beloved copy of Peanuts and Snoopy that was published like this. Not only was just brought to Poland and reprinted, it was actually traced, redrawn by a Polish guy and then like republished in book form. So it was like exactly like this, but slightly more wonky and like not exactly the same line because it was just that, but the dialogues were kept and it was just redrawn and published as Peanuts in Poland in the 80s.
But those were comics that were published before the Iron Curtain came down.
Yeah. But then what Marcin said, then like after 89 there was like a big hole in anything other than like reprints because suddenly we were flooded with the Western, like the mass culture. So like superhero comics and double duck and stuff. This is where I lost interest, for example, reading
Yeah, and the funny thing is that in 80s the amount of copies were like 25,000 each is every issue, and now only Turgal, Batman from DC has this issue. Yeah, this version.
It's a bit similar in Germany that magazines or popular comics in earlier times had a much higher print run. So you say you lost interest a little in comics for a while.
Yeah, or at least I did not find myself on whatever was published on Polish. Like probably product and that stuff was already starting to show up like in the late 90s, early 2000s. But also because there were no people who were doing anything that would be interesting for me, I could not imagine that I could draw comics professionally or make illustrations professionally because it was so distant from my own experience that like it really took me decades to realize that I like to do it actually.
So at some point you started studying literature, I think?
Yeah, I didn't do art school studies because really there was like this huge gap throughout the 90s and early 2000s where creatively there wasn't much interesting stuff going on. And then there was this huge explosion around, 8 years ago, I don't know, and suddenly there was a wave of new young Polish illustrators and comic makers that started suddenly doing things that were exciting and interesting.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So I caught up on it, but yeah, it's
Well, but you already started becoming an illustrator, I understand. Was it like something you did because you couldn't do comics, or you were...
no. For me, I don't see much division between the two.
Yeah.
I was like, both are natural, and I sometimes don't really see whether what I'm doing is illustration or comics. And actually some people that look at my children's book illustrations, for them, like if like a French person looks at my drawings, that for me are like super classical illustration, they're like, this is comics, this is not illustration. So, and I don't really see that, so I have a very... And I think it's also quite true of a lot of people that do things right now.
How's it for you? It's so you're less of an illustrator working in children's books and different magazines.
I mean, my main focus area are comics and animation, not illustration.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
exactly. So, did you intend at some point? Did you at some point get the idea? I want to be a comics artist.
Yeah, sure. That was my big dream when I was in primary school. And it was a break because I started to play basketball. I used to for 6 years. Yeah, and there was a moment of decision who I want to be in the future, and I chose comics. And then, I started to learn, and I had my own master. And there's a doctor in comics. Yeah, can I say it like that? PhD, in comics.
You can study comics.
No, I have my own master. His name is Wojciech.
Okay.
And he showed me stuff like Moebius, Manara, and all of classic from Western market. Because all I know before was Sagi Yojimbo and Donald Duck and some superhero comics.
Yes.
Yeah. And I opened my website, my blog, in 2007, and since then I am growing.
Yes, so it seems. I mean, since I think your first book came out in 2008, right?
Yeah, but it was not my professional debut.
Yes.
And Captain Sure, my professional debut, was printed in 2010.
Which, at that time, you were still 19, which is still quite remarkable, I would say. And ever since then, Marcin has produced one book a year. Right, and you were working in different genres, you were exploring different kinds of storytelling. Are you always looking for the new challenge?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There should be something interesting in that work, because creating comics takes a long time. Yeah, like half of a year or 1 year. Yeah, so I need to find it interesting all the time.
You have published this book. This is actually the French edition. And, it's not the newest book that he has published, but the one from 2013. Yeah, in Poland it was released. This is called Fugazi Music Club, and I'm really happy that right now there's a German publisher and it will be published in Germany as well in next January. Egmont Graphic Novel will publish this in Germany. I heard about it while I was working on the issue and then STRAPAZIN, and I was really happy that finally there is someone from Poland who is not Roginski published in Germany. It's a very nice story based on actual events. It's about a music club in Warsaw. Can you maybe tell a bit about it?
Yeah, there was a club in 1992, and it was founded by a group of young guys like me, over 20 years old. And all the most famous bands from Poland played there. Not for money, only for a beer or stuff like that. And it was fun. It was a very colorful place. Crazy without limits and without control. And it was 3 years after Iron Curtain. So it was the first such a colorful place in Warsaw and in this part of Europe. Fugazi Music Club was closed because of troubles with mafia and dealers and adults world.
Yes. And when I read the book, my girlfriend is Polish. I was really surprised to see that really it's like many of the bands that are now top 10 bands in Poland, they all used to play there, or punk bands that are still around. It's really like one of these places where Polish popular culture like now was seeded, or independent culture. Like you were saying, at the same time, more or less, there was this product group, and it must have been really an intense time in Poland.
No, they were later,
okay.
In the beginning of the century.
Okay. Yes. So you were working with one of the guys. There's only on the French edition. There's only your name in it. On the Polish edition, it also mentions the owner or the guy who established Fugazi Music Club. You were working with him.
Yes, I was working with him. We met, several times in Warsaw and in Łódź when I lived, and I'm studying at the Łódź Film School. And there were interviews. He showed me many photos, and he's also graduated from a fine school, so he sometimes he prepared me drawings or places.
Yeah. And in your books, you very often work with authors. Why? I mean, is there such a scene in Poland where some people are comics authors and some are just artists? And
No. Now I'm working on the adaptation of a book of a novel, so it's much different from that. And my most recent book, called Inside, was made in cooperation with my friend, comic author also, Daniel Chmielewski.
who happens to be in STRAPAZIN too.
Yeah, I recommend it.
Yes, it's right. When I read what you were doing, you're still a student, right? Yeah, you're a student.
It's my graduate year now in Łódź Film School. I'm working on my graduate film called The Giant. Yeah, it's a documentary story, 15 minutes long.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is it your aspiration to become a full-time comics professional, or? I'm trying to get an impression about how, if it is possible to survive as a comics artist in Poland. Is the
No. And many of my friends were coming book artists, voice for advertisement, for video games. For example, they were working on the Witcher. You know that Wiedźmin?
yeah.
Witcher.
Yeah, the Witcher.
Witcher. It's a
It's
quite
the
famous game.
game.
Yeah.
The third part was just released.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they're preparing storyboards for ads or for movies.
Yes.
Yeah. And my plan is to be a half professional comic book creator, half time
Yes.
professional and half time animator.
Ah.
Creators. Maybe not the plan, and dream.
Yes. When I look at your books, I felt like you are always also challenging yourself stylistically, because over the course of your books you can see a clear evolution from some to a very individual dynamic style that you are working in. Is it? I mean, it seems like you have more influences and you're kind of freeing yourself from the influences right now. Would you say so?
Maybe, you know, when I found something interesting, there's a pair of inspirations. Yeah, I discovered Maiwald comics 2 years ago,
Yes.
and I was like, wow,
Yes.
comics can look it up.
Yes. Does the Polish comic scene observe what's going on in other European countries? Or is it mainly focused on, I don't know, America or Japan?
I think the most independent part of scene, like me or Zosia and the guys from STRAPAZIN issue, yes, we are observing that, and some publishers also. But still, the most popular are the comics from America, from France, but you know, I mean fantasy France.
Fantasy France, yes. Zosia, you moved away from Poland at some point.
Yes.
I'm not trying to make a point to draw a line between you and all other Polish emigrants or people who move away from Poland for some reason, but did you go away because there was something you couldn't do in Poland?
No, I didn't feel like this.
It's just
and
like
also, when I left with my boyfriend at the time, it's because, I mean, it felt like a nice thing to live abroad for a year or two. We didn't want to be abroad for 8 years, which is what happened.
Yeah.
But like, it's also, I think it's a different frame of mind than when people were leaving Poland, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, that they're like leaving the country to do something else. And we didn't have this feeling. I mean, Warsaw is a super creative and extremely interesting city. That's the city where I'm from. And I definitely felt the support and like a creative community that exists there. So that was not a problem. So it was more just to experience another kind of life for a while, then come back to Poland. And this is what we're still planning to do. However, I did start drawing professionally when I left Poland. I did not start, I mean, it did not occur to me, once again, that I could do it as a career while I was living in Warsaw. It was only after I moved to Italy and took up like a year-long postgraduate course in illustration for fun.
Yes.
That I discovered that actually it can turn into a career, just because I met so many illustrators and comic authors in Italy that were living from it, and there is a super strong community there that is also very tight-knit. I don't know, I'm not sure how the Polish comics community works. I'm sure there's like, I think there's like a big internet thing where people know each other online. I'm not sure how it also works in reality. What I did enjoy in Italy is that all those people are friends and that they meet every 2 or 3 months at festivals and shows, and even in Milan or Bologna there's like an illustration or comics exhibition every week practically, where you see the crowd and the chat. So it was also like a very appealing crowd to belong to.
Yeah.
And it definitely made the difference.
Yeah, and you moved to Milan, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Working, or you were establishing even a studio with
Yeah, with some Italian friends I met at the postgraduate illustration course. We actually decided to keep working together after this year in Milan, and we rented out a space and created like a weird illustration and comics co-working space. So we were 10 people there, and all of us doing either comics or illustration. And it's still going on. I'm still part of it, even though I don't live in Italy anymore. And it was also a great kick to keep doing things, because I think a lot of us otherwise would have given up, because when you're fresh out of school, I mean, if you're a prodigy like Marcin, then you work all the time. But for a lot of people, I think the reality is that they're out of art school and they find themselves a bit lost, or maybe not sure if they should keep going and doing illustration or comics, because it can be tough. It takes, also you need to put in a lot of years before you start.
Does it ring true to you? I mean, is there a kind of a network of artists that is, for example, in Warszawa, or you are from living in Łódź, that meets and supports each other, or is it more like everyone is working for himself?
No, for sure there is a strong community, but you know, the Polish scene is, I think I can say like that, it's small. And it's maybe tiny, and because of that there is a strong community. And in Warsaw there are exhibitions once per few months, and every bigger festival in Poland is occupied by a group of the same people every time. And we know each other, and I can say I know every single publisher in Poland. And we used to play basketball together or football during the festivals.
It's probably not that different from Germany in some ways.
Maybe. Every playing basketball.
Table tennis. Zosia, you now have made your own first book, which was published late last year.
Yes.
And I mean, it's in Italian. It's an Italian publisher. How did that publisher approach you? Did you approach him?
No, he approached me. It actually would not occur to me to write and illustrate a comic book before. As in, I've always been drawing small comics for myself, but the first thing I published was in 2012, probably, which was for an anthology sponsored by the city of Warsaw, and it was a book where all the scripts were written by a single girl called Monika, who is a part-time professional comics writer. And I started doing comics professionally working with her. So I would get a script and she would do all the research and send me reference, and I would just draw whatever she told me to draw. But right after I finished school in Milan, this publisher who used to come to the course and look through our portfolio asked me to contribute to a series of books they have. In which Italian authors, illustrators, comic authors talk about their childhood in different parts of Italy. And they asked me to contribute with an explanation of what growing up in Poland was like. So he gave me the possibility and also gave me a subject and quite a lot of restrictions, because the series have already been going for a couple of years, so the format, the number of pages, the structure were more or less the same in all the books. And I set off to do it. It took me 3 years to draw it, but I am not used to writing my own stuff, so this was, for me it was triple the work than a normal comic, because the writing took me a huge amount of time and I would go crazy, I would really
But it obviously doesn't discourage you from going on.
No, it was super inspiring, but it also took 3 years, so I am not immediately starting off with a new project. I need to.
Maybe tell us a bit about, which is in Italian, a testa in giù. It's upside down?
Yeah, like hepwork, topsy-turvy, I don't know, something like this.
It's a childhood story. Is it your childhood?
It's my childhood story. They're all, I mean, all the stories in the series are also biographical. And what I like about them is they are not, because most of them are Italian stories, they are not about particular trauma or some big events or memoirs that, you know, they are usually just little documents of how people live. And also it makes a lot of sense in Italy where the regions are very different from each other. So also it's enough to move to 100 kilometers and people eat differently, observe different holidays practically or in different manners, and the backgrounds differ a lot depending on class, I guess. So it's more of like a super low-key explanation of look how life looks like in different places in Italy and now Warsaw as well. So I also this storyline is more or less the same. It's like a very low-key narration of what life of a certain family looked like from 1981 to 1989.
I had that theory that childhood seems to be something you're particularly interested in. I mean, you're working in children's book illustration. You did this story for No-Brow Anthology, which was also a childhood.
Yeah, but this is because I was working on this book already and I wanted to, because I had a lot of material for this book, I decided to work with the similar topic because I knew I could.
So there goes my theory.
No, it was just a theory, but I also, when I was writing it, I discovered that this is like the one story everyone has, like when you, it's like like a super basic narrative for everyone. If you ask them about the life story, the actually interesting part is them as children, I discovered. Because when you become a teenager and then an adult, I mean, you can live through different situations, but nothing forms you like those first years, and I think everyone has this narrative, and it's always interesting because those first experiences are always unique.
Do you want to make a childhood memoir comic? Would there be something you think would be worth telling?
Not really. I can only work on someone's childhood story. Yeah, with interviews.
But the animation you showed me yesterday was quite autobiographical, no? And we were working, it was about your family.
Yes, but it wasn't a childhood.
I know. Yeah, but it did talk about family and your relations with them.
It's true.
It did have a ring of like.
Well, now, Zosia, like you said, it didn't, even though it took 3 years to finish the book, which was it? It didn't discourage you to go on keeping comics in your focus. You took part in a workshop called Colonial Soldiers and the Great War.
Yes,
Yes.
that was unexpected.
And I think that was the context when we first met in I think it was in Hamburg.
Yeah, or in Berlin even during the first.
Oh yeah, maybe mistaken with Hamburg, but so you seem to be very interested in continuing with the comics.
No, I definitely want to continue with comics for sure. And like doing the comic, when No-Brow asked me to do the comic for them, it was also a big moment for me because I've always, I mean, I love those anthologies and this is definitely what I was looking up to when I was starting to think about doing comics professionally. So when they wrote me and asked me to contribute to the latest anthology, I had like a feeling of really being appreciated for what I'm doing, so I definitely wanted to continue.
Well, your newest project is something that is not exactly comics related, but I found it really sweet, and so we should mention it. You moved to Zurich a while ago, some months, and now you started a blog.
Yes.
A word a day.
Ein Wort, ein Tag.
Yeah.
Ein Wort.
Wait, what is it? What are you doing?
No, it's just because since I've been living in Zurich for a year and a half, and I discovered that Swiss German is impossible to learn. I'm trying at least to get a grip on some basic German, and one not very fast way to do it is that I illustrate a German word a day, because I remember it better that way.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the words people contribute, because I ask people to give me interesting words to illustrate, are completely useless. I mean, they're beautiful, but the probability of using them ever in a conversation is not very high.
Do you have an example? I'm trying to think of one. Like 4 or 5.
The first word I illustrated was Dachschaden.
Very sweet. So, said, you went to Milan, now you're in Zurich. You're not in Poland. And do you consider yourself as a Polish comic artist because you find some particular Polish qualities in your work, or do you consider yourself more an European artist? It's a good question. I'm not sure if I have a ready answer for that. When it comes to my publishing scope or what I'm interested in, it's definitely I find myself a European comic artist. Like when I think about maybe doing a new book, I rather think of trying to first find an Italian or French publisher rather than a Polish one, because I just know that the market is bigger and there's maybe more variety, so choice. On the other hand, the way I draw and the topics I do are obviously super related to Poland, and I think I'm also quite shaped by like Polish illustration aesthetics from the 60s and 70s, and I feel definitely part of a tradition that is Eastern European. So for sure, and I try to keep up with what's going on in Poland, and I think especially now where like the comic scene is super interesting. Do you observe what's going on?
Yeah.
Do you go to festivals?
I've never been to a Polish festival, but I'm not sure if the people I follow, like the small scene that Marcin was talking about, I don't even know if they are a big part of the big comics festival in Poland, or then you would have to tell me.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling that, like, I don't know, when last time I was at a Polish comics festival was probably 15 years ago, and it was just not a crowd that I would be interested in. So
things have changed, I would say.
Things have changed.
Like, I remember when I went to a festival once, it was in the cultural center in Łódź, in the center of the city. Now it's moved to a stadium.
Yeah, the biggest stadium in this city, and it's located in Łódź, in the middle of Poland. I think that Łódź Comic Book Festival is bigger than Munich Festival. And last year there were probably like 10,000 people, but it's connected with game industry. Yeah, so it's international comic and games. But it is very important, those festivals are very important events for the comics community. Yeah, for sure, and they are so important for publishers because there are big troubles with distribution in Poland, because the main bookstore, the biggest bookstore, isn't fair for publishers. And there's no fixed price for in every bookstore, and there are discounts and stuff like that. And during the festivals, publishers have already discounts like 25% on every book. So many people go only to buy a book. Yeah, that's one thing I noticed while I was there. I mean, people, the publishers here also sometimes sell quite a high number of copies, I would say, like a couple of dozen. If someone is signing maybe a few more, I mean, Don Rosa probably will sell like piles and piles of books, but it was very common in Łódź when I was there for a publisher to sell 100, 120 copies, even more of books that were just released.
Yeah, but also because it's hard to come by comics if you're not at the comics festival. That was even in Warsaw, there's not so many, there's maybe 1 or 2 comics shops, and they are not super well stocked, and and I used to go to the main chain bookstores, but like you're super lucky to find one of the Polish, nice Polish publishers, comics publishers stuff. So I think people just don't have a place to get it, otherwise this is why those festivals would be such a great.
It's actually a short story, maybe you know it or you have read it in the STRAPAZIN by one artist from Switzerland who spent some time in Poland and did little online comics about being there, what is life like, some cultural things and events, and she made like one story about, her name is Fanny Baucher, and she made one short comic about finding comics in a bookstore, and she shows here like the one massive floor in the bookstore where there's a teeny tiny comic shelf, and the comic shelf itself is like 50% Torgal, some superheroes, and like a handful of independent comics.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's really
like literally 3 or 4 every time.
yeah. So this makes the festivals even more important.
Yes, for sure. A different thing is manga corner. It's quite big.
Okay. Do they also have individual festivals?
No. They are connected with the main comic festivals in Poland, but in bookstores, the corners of manga are bigger than comic corners.
Yesterday,
Same in Germany.
I was going to ask you, yesterday we went to Hugendubel am Stachus, and of course we have to check out the comic shelf there, and do you think it kind of represents the, it shows similar variety than it does in Poland, because they had a massive manga shelf, they had a big shelf for classics like Asterix, Lucky Luke, and there was now a bigger shelf for graphic novels, and that's basically it.
Yeah. And whether you can find Peanuts or Carrion House, so maybe there is a hope for future comic creators from Poland.
And well, you are working now on a new book.
Yeah, free.
Yes. You're so protective. It's crazy. I mean, one is with a very famous Polish singer. So you are sticking to the music topic.
Yeah. Because I'm music addicted, I need to listen to the music when I draw.
Yeah.
And when I was preparing my comic about Vauxhall.
Yeah.
Vauxhall.
It's in the STRAPAZIN there's a short story by Marcin about a video store.
Video store.
Yeah, where you can rent videos, and it's...
Yeah, they were so popular in the 90s.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I used to listen only one song for a few days when I was preparing it. It was Could I Find This Alice, maybe you know that.
Yes.
It was a hit. And to feel the climate, I used to listen to it.
You got into it really well.
Yeah, it sounds crazy. Yeah. And my new book will be a graphic interview with a musician from Poland who won the biggest music award in Poland, and he's over 30 years old, and he doesn't know what to do, what he can do else in Poland, because he sings only in Polish. So it's like you everything and whatever.
Well, for comics it seems...
It's interesting moment in his life, I think.
Yes.
Because he's not Johnny Cash or...
Yeah, he's in the middle of his career, yes. And for comics, I think there is still a lot ground that can be covered. I noticed, and I read about it, that in the past couple of years there was a lot of recognition for comics, like some awards that comics artists got or were nominated for that surprised people. Like there was this Nike Literature Award, where Marcin, who's also in the STRAPAZIN, was nominated for with one of his books. You were nominated.
First time in history, comic book was nominated in Literature Award.
Yes, and you were nominated for an art award.
Yeah, in visual arts category.
Yeah, so still there is not the comics category.
Yeah, of course.
But do you think it will change? I mean, like right now that it's really cool that there is this kind of recognition, but it seems like people don't know exactly. Like sometimes it's literature, sometimes it's visual art. Do you feel that in general the climate towards the comics is changing?
Comic is now in Poland present in galleries for sure, and it didn't used to. So it's a positive change. for sure, and also market of original pages is increasing. And growing up, and yeah, but unfortunately I think there is no hope for an official institution like Polish Film Institute and stuff like that. There is no chance, I think, for that.
No?
But there is like this whole weird section of the comics market, which is like the state-sponsored comics that became a couple of years ago. There started this trend where whenever there's a big
cities and
whenever there's a big date that is important, like I don't know, some uprising or like commemoration of whatever, and there's a lot of dates like this in Poland. They have this, so one of like the ways to celebrate now, and it's part of almost every celebration like this, is to have a comics anthology on the subject. And I think it was started by the Warsaw Uprising Museum, that is all devoted to like the 44 uprising, that they started putting out every year like collections of stories, comic stories about the Second World War.
Okay.
And it grew into a little industry, I think, because the money is decent and sure, because you get it from the government. I mean, the Ministry of Culture just said, okay, you're gonna get €1,000, just give us 6 pages on, don't know, the Jewish community in the 30s or whatever, and people sit down and draw. And yeah, also now cities, as you said, like use it for promotion. So I definitely entered the government. I mean, the way the government communicates to people like in culture is through comics, because they're like, "Ooh, comics are cool. We can try to sell history to young people through comics," which has various effects. I mean, some of them are really great. Some of them are clearly just made because they needed a hand and the money, and they're not so interesting or inspiring. Or
There even was an article lately in a political magazine, in Politica, which is kind of like Focus or Spiegel, which was about the economic success or general cultural success of Polish comics abroad as an industry, which I found really interesting, that such a big media, the big media are recognizing that things are happening, and things are happening. And I'm really glad that that something can be shown here in the STRAPAZIN, and this is your chance to get into Polish comics culture by reading, of course, but the best way is by reading. And in the STRAPAZIN itself, there are also links to websites of the artists, of course, of some news websites, publishers, and so on, where you can get further information. And I hope that in the future we will get to see more Polish comics here in Germany being published. Do you have any questions for the artists? Yeah, fire away.
Well, first I have to apologize my bad English, and then I came late. The lecture before was too long. Well, I have some two topics. The first is you told us about the Peanuts comics redrawn. Are the content the same from American, or did the artist change the content?
I mean, the drawings stayed the same. I think they were just traced. I'm not sure about the dialogues, if he invented the exchanges or not. Like, some of them were probably copied from the original, but they might have cut out probably if something was decided it's like too capitalist sounding, they probably changed it into.
I'm asking because some years ago I was in Krakow, and it's always surprising to see what comic stuff, what happened to comic stuff when it comes in another culture. I got a Superman comic and found pictures cut out from a Supergirl comic. But in this Polish comic, she was changed into Lois Lane, and she was bound on a table and with naked breasts. Of course, DC would never allow such a thing. So it was surprising to see what's possible in Poland. Do you know more examples like this?
hard to tell, but we're definitely like a super pirate country. So we do take a lot of stuff and remix it into something else. Probably nowadays not as much as it used to be, but I guess like until like the late 90s, the pirate culture was quite strong, so this would happen easily. Nowadays, I'm not so sure. There's probably a bit more control.
There are many fan translations in internet for comics unavailable in Poland.
Which leads to the next, or one more topic, censorship. Wasn't there a government office who says their press are forbidden in comics for children or things like this? Do you know anything
like
about
in the
this?
after '89.
Before and
I mean,
after?
before '89, there were no superhero comics published in Poland. I mean, no. I mean, the only like there were like just a few Western comics published, and like Peanuts was one of them, and this was the kind of comics that would be published. You would not get Superman. I think it was like totally off limits because of showing America and progress and like in a good light, so it could not happen. After '89, it was complete anarchy for a while. I mean, people were like literally probably printing stuff off of the internet or like bringing it into the country and selling it on the sidewalk. So there was also very little control, and I don't think anyone ever cared about comics enough to censor anything, because they are used to be such unknown territory in Poland. I don't think that there was any control on what can happen in comics, but this was like one of the reasons I stopped reading comics in like mid-90s, because it was so misogynist and like really horrible at times that I just could not. I mean, it was not a thing I would be interested in.
The second topic is about the Shoah as content in the comics. I know from Western culture, like Superman, Captain America, or things like this, entertainment comics, if they depend on the Second World War, they often have the Shoah in the content in the story. For example, in Poland you have Kapitän Klaus, which I think was very popular, but I never see any picture or anything going in the direction of the Shoah. So I think the Shoah before '89 it was a taboo.
I mean, that's a good question, but it's quite hard to answer. In comics, yes, they were popular culture, and like the detective comics or military comics before '89, they were clearly just communist propaganda. So they, I mean, the protagonists were just doing whatever the government decided that the official history was. It was different in literature, for example, and like as like Shoah is super present in other kinds of culture in Poland, and like in primary school and secondary school, like most of your obligatory reading is testimonies from the camps, and so it was very present in different ways. Plus also the oral history, which I mean now it's less, but it was such it was so present in most families. In at least I don't know in a lot of places in Poland, among my friends for sure. Every 10th person I know had someone who was in the camps. So it was sort of, you didn't really need to address it through popular culture because it was still very present in like the general discourse. But comics did not touch it for sure. And after '89 it changed, but very slowly. Like Mouse was published in Poland in 2000, maybe, and to like a lot of demonstrations and protests. I mean, a lot, relatively to the fame of the comic in Poland, but there was a lot of opposition to it, especially because Polish people are depicted as pigs, and they thought it's offensive that Polish people did it. So yeah, it's a subject that people are starting to deal with now. But also, like, the main discourse when you talk about Second World War in Poland is Polish people during the Second World War, because there's also so much like national trauma that it tends to go also, I mean, it takes up a lot of the discourse that like we suffered a lot, and of course there was Jewish community, but I mean, it concentrates on like the military aspects of Polish.
But I think the thinking is changing.
No, carry on.
Yeah?
Okay, yes.
I think the thinking is changing. The years before I was in Krakow, of course, I visited Auschwitz and asked for comics, and they even don't have mouths there. They were very astonished and angry, and comic and Holocaust that can't come together. But now they have a project with stories from Auschwitz, real stories, and it was made in comics.
Yeah, there's
They
one
have a program now.
comic that I really like that was made by Polish authors that's called Achtung Selig.
Yes.
And that was published in French. No, no.
In-
If you'd like
in
to
several
look. And this
languages.
this is also about not only the Second World War, but also how more or less our generation is dealing with Shoah and what it's like growing up in Poland with like the discourse and the testimonies. And but it's also quite entertaining. I mean, entertaining. It's like it's a good book, I think. So, I think that I mean one of the best that came out in Poland on this subject. But yeah, it's still not a widespread thing. I mean, it's not addressed. The Second World War in general is addressed quite broadly now, but not. There's a lot of like military comics about like tanks and shootouts.
What, in Poland?
Yeah.
All right. And can I ask? I come from Italy, but I haven't been there for a long time. I know that in Poland there is a little bit of right-wing movement, and in Italy as well.
Quite a bit.
How is it in Italy? Could you feel it, or?
In Italy, the right wing.
Yeah, right-wing. I mean, you must have been there while Berlusconi was.
I came at the height of the Berlusconi era, and it was pretty bad. And also in the north, there's but I don't know if it's pertinent to our discussion. But I used to live over the Leganon offices, so
Oh, all right.
which is the far right movement that was all foreigners, all also southern Italians out of northern Italy. It's present, but I never was like intimidated or no one told me to.
And comic book people in Italy are not involved much in this.
In politics,
In
not at all. But I
okay,
think when
okay.
people give up on politics, in general.
yeah. That's one.
Yeah, okay. So there's two questions. The first is, so how is the freedom of speech been into the comics in Poland now? If there is, because it's in Egypt, there is a lot of censorship into the political issues, the religious issues. I mean, in some cases, something will be censorship if it's gonna be sexual a little bit or offensive in kind of insult you, or had a dirty or slang language with the streets will be censored or banned, and it's already happened. So how that looks like in Poland? So.
The comics with very strong violence can be sold in official big bookstores, but in little, family bookstores or by internet, there's no limits for that.
So it's not officially sold in bookstores, but you can find it in the internet. So
but I mean with very, very high amount of violence comics. But there's no so many comics like that. No, there were a few porn comics in Poland, but it was like unofficial, private printed,
because in Egypt it's kind of like if you have something to be discussing a political issue, especially after the revolution and now, especially, it's kind of if you want to make it say just publish it, make it web comics or just online, don't publish it. Because it might be kind of censored or you might be called on or be in prison or just kidnapped. Something like that. That's might happen. So I guess in Poland now it doesn't have to be like that, but it will be might be censored.
On the internet you can do everything, you know. So.
Exactly. And the other question, so is for both of you, so how do you work? I mean, how could you start your book? So it's kind of technical one. So.
Okay, like day to day, how do we work?
Yes, let's say it in another. What's your perfect day?
No, there is no perfect day, I guess. No, I can tell you how I worked on this book because it was quite different to what I do normally because I had to write the text and draw. And this also explains why it took me 3 years to make it. It's because before every chapter I would sit down and write it first. Like I would write the script. And then once I have more or less the words or like the storyline of like, I guess a 10-page part, this would take me like 2 days. Then it would be another 3 days to a week to storyboard the pages. And then another week to draw them. So like 3 weeks for 10 pages. And I also,
perfect day, but the perfect week.
this is the perfect week. I mean, when everything goes well, but I also but when I'm drawing, it's quite time consuming because I don't draw with ink. I draw with like very greasy pencils, which are impossible to scan. So I do the drawings and they're like super messy and I have to scan them and it takes me another like 2 days to
Clean it up.
Yeah, so this is like the super technical part of it. But I like to maintain this.
This texture.
This texture, yeah, exactly. So this is why, and I'm used to it, so I don't mind. But it's like takes 3 times as much time than if you did it with ink, I guess.
Or digitally.
Or digitally.
Because you work digitally.
Yeah, my new comics I'm preparing will be and this drawing by hand on paper and scan and stuff like that. But for example, Fugazi there was no sketches on paper and anything. I was prepared each day, and in first few weeks I was preparing, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages per day. And in the end, when there was a deadline and when I was strung into this story, it was like 5 pages per day. Yeah, and I'm working sometimes about 10 hours a day. Yeah, for a few months to finish the book ahead.
Sorry, did you say 5 pages a day?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's quick, I would say.
Yeah, I do like 1 page for like it takes me 3 days to complete a single page. So this is like wildly different times. But yeah, like the 10-hour workday if you're doing comics is totally normal, I would say. It's really either way, you have to put in a lot of hours. There's nothing to laugh about.
So yeah, thanks for coming, and I can only recommend go to the STRAPAZIN atelier in Dzierżawska 5, or get the magazine. I have a few here, or you can get it at Digital Modelle STRAPAZIN booth in the big hall. Thanks for coming.